So, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. Our topic for today is career as an entertainment lawyer and discussion on the OTT platforms. And for that, we have a very special guest with a very dynamic career journey. Welcome, Mr. Navarre Roy. Thank you for taking out your time for this. Sir is an expert on intellectual property and entertainment law. He's an alumni of School of Excellence Law and has previously worked with the International Justice Mission and then as a senior associate at Selvam and Selvam, and since then, he's been with Anand and Anand and is currently a managing associate there. Sir was also the visiting faculty at University of Madras for 6 years and has briefly worked with the All India Radio as a radio jockey previously. So, sir, thank you so much once again, and thank you all participants for joining us today. Sir, if I missed out anything, please feel free to give your introduction and tell us a bit more about your journey till here.
No, I think that's that's very kind of you. And no, thank you very much for having me over today. And thank you to Law Seco as well for putting this together. And yeah, for inviting me as well. It's been, yeah, the background, like you mentioned, does sound a little varied and interesting when it's read out that way. Some of it seems unbelievable even to me, but but yes, it was something that that has happened, and it's been a really interesting journey so far. With regard to your question on journey to law per se, I think let me just preface this by saying that I don't have any lawyers in the family. I'm a first generation lawyer. My father is a surgeon, and I went as far away from that as possible. But in terms of interest, I was always interested in law, largely because of the books that I read. At a very early age, I started reading Earl Stanley Gardner, and all the TV shows that I was watching was all law related. So it was either The Practice or JAG, very different from the Suits that you guys all watch right now. But in a manner of speaking, those were all very interesting and romanticized the idea of law. And yeah, so that's probably one of the reasons why I got into the profession. It was something that I liked. Debating as well in school. So it sort of just seemed like a natural progression to take this particular field, as it were. And yes, and so that's how through a rather large meandering course I've ended up here where I am, dealing with intellectual property and entertainment law.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that, sir. And I'm a Prajita, and I have with me my colleague Priyanka Kolera. So both of us will be moderating this hour with you, sir. So we can start with the webinar now. And you did briefly tell us, how you moved into law and what your sort of mindset was before that. So how has your journey been as a lawyer up until now? And even as a student before that, how was your journey in college? And later on, what motivated you to take this, specialize in this field as a intellectual property and entertainment lawyer?
Right. Well, in terms of law college, I think, so, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily advise this to everybody, but my factors in deciding to, or where to study law was maybe in hindsight a little restrictive, because I'd only applied to 2 places, and that was it. One, of course, was the National Law School, India in Bangalore, and the other one was the School of Excellence Law in Chennai. And the reason that I'd applied to Chennai and wanted to stay there, one, it was hometown, and more importantly, I was doing a lot of things just outside of school in terms of theater work and also on the radio. So I wanted to do that while I was studying law, and so I chose the college and I chose a university that worked perfectly for me to that extent, where I could do something outside of law as well. But yeah, college was good. It was very interesting to the extent that classes go on, and I don't know how many people actually. There are a fair number of people who pay attention and do well in college. I was one who just sort of paid probably the barest minimum to it. But yeah, I was focusing on a lot of other things. But the university and the college was good. It was very interesting. We did have some political changes, owing to which we had a lot of administrative changes as well in our university. So originally what was a full day's worth of college invariably came down to just a couple of hours, which gave us a lot of time to do our own internships and work like this on the radio. Plus I was also working with a company called Story Trails that did theme-based tours and outings for people. So yeah, it gave me a lot of time to do all of that. And 5 years is a long time as well to sort of explore all of that, including the law.
So then from your college, how did you move on to the field of intellectual property, and how
Right.
was your journey as a lawyer since then?
Fair enough. As soon as I graduated, though, you can say a lot of us get into law with very idealistic notions, and mine was a similar sort of journey. So I started off with the International Justice Mission, as you've mentioned, which is a human rights organization. It's headquartered in the US and has field offices in multiple countries around the world, each dealing with a different focus area of human rights violation, right? The Chennai office was focusing on bonded labor, and that's something that I got into. I was interning with them for about a year and a half before I joined. So during my entire final year, I spent time over there, and the work there was very interesting in terms of going with the government, doing raids on facilities, either rice mills or brick kilns, to see if there was any forced labor practices going on over there. So I did that for about a year and a half. And I felt I sort of professionally, I wanted to do something more in terms of the law. And given my limited theater background in radio work and music, it was IP sort of seemed the most synchronized, or let's say the most parallel field to where my interests align. And then that's the reason why I chose a boutique firm. I chose a firm called Selvam, which was a boutique firm that dealt exclusively with intellectual property. And that really sort of started off this journey, because as a smaller firm, you get a lot of opportunity to work on a variety of subjects within. You're not just a cog in the machinery. You get hands-on experience in pretty much everything across the board, and so that was a great experience to have. And some of my clients were naturally in the entertainment business on account of that. A lot of artists, a few production houses, and so it just seemed like a natural progression from there. It wasn't something that I was looking for in terms of entertainment law, but it just seemed to align that way because a lot of our clients were dealing with that. So I wouldn't say I was searching for it, but that's how it ended up. And then yes, after that I was fortunate to do a course on intellectual property valuation. And after that, I joined Anand & Anand, where I've been. And Anand & Anand has been a wonderful opportunity. It's a really big firm that specializes in IP, and almost everyone in the industry knows of it. So on account of the fact that the professionals here are excellent, and the work that's being done is fabulous. So the exposure to clientele as well is incredible, because you get to work with a lot of high-profile clients as well as and everybody across the board. So I'd say I was fortunate in terms of the way that my career progressed that way. I did not plan it the way that it turned out, but in retrospect, I have no regrets, and it's been quite fulfilling.
That's wonderful to hear. So my question here would be, so you started off as an intellectual property lawyer, and then now you are also doing media and entertainment work. So what exactly would be the difference between the two? Or is there any difference for our students, if they're planning out their career? So if they want to see which field is more suitable for them, so what exactly is the difference here?
Okay, so intellectual property covers a broad range of, there is a little bit of overlap between, say, entertainment law and IP, but intellectual property is quite broad, because if you've got on the technology front, you have patents; on the artistic front, you've got copyrights, you've got trademarks, which covers all brands and businesses and designs for product-based entities. Whereas if you're looking at entertainment law, there are certain regulatory aspects, but a large chunk of it falls under the bucket of, say, copyright law as well. So there's a fair bit of overlap in terms of it, but entertainment law is more in terms of contractual work and regulatory work, depending on which side of the board you are, whether you're acting for content creators or content acquisition entities or the distributors. So that broadly varies, but there's a fair bit of overlap.
So, sir, I would like to ask you a question that for a lot of law students here, there is a myth around entertainment law that it is very glamorous. You just you're a day and night on call with film stars and celebrities. So what is that myth and the stereotype that you would like to address here, so that people who are planning into it based on the glamour or based on the shine around it can decide actually what the work day looks like for you, and Is it as glamorous as it seems in Suits?
I mean, the practice of law in Suits is incredibly glamorous, regardless of whether
Yeah.
he's practicing entertainment law or not. But I mean, it does have its days. I will give you that. There are days when you are rubbing shoulders with celebrities, and that can be quite exciting. Of course, invariably, that sort of, it doesn't fade, but you get perhaps a little bit used to it. But more than that, I think like any field in law, you go with certain preconceived notions, but I think it's best to have uh, in some amount of experience so that you know whether or not you like it. In terms of this, there is a lot of hard work that goes into poring over contracts, which they don't show in episodes of Suits. You're poring over contracts to see whether this is going to affect your client or not, and you really know about it only when there are problems. So, it's trying to foresee those, and a lot of it is also last minute. So I think it's just the nature of the industry and the businesses that a lot of the work on this front is pretty last minute. Even if you look at the cases that come up, there are a lot of last minute filings for suits on plagiarism in terms of trying to stop content and things like that. It's heavy. There's a little bit of a peak when it all comes in, and then of course, like any other business, it goes off. But if you're constantly in it, it can get a little tiring. But that's the way that the law is in every field. But yes, this does have some perks in terms of sometimes getting tickets to go to shows and meeting with celebrities. That's there, and as long as I think you keep that level of a little bit of excitement alive as well, it's good not to get cynical. It helps you with that as well.
Thank you for answering that, sir. So, you were just talking about what the myths are around this industry. So, other than this, what are the factors that go into deciding a career in media law? And how can one prepare for it? So, since it's a very niche area, so how important are internships in this area for you to move forward and have a career in the same?
Yeah, I think internships in general are really underrated. When you're in college, you don't really look at it as it's just something that you maybe have as a checklist of things that you want to get done. But I think it's important. Everybody gets into law for certain specific reasons, right? And what I would say is when you are doing internships, try and see and identify subjects or interest areas that you like and try and focus on internships on those. But to a large extent, be as broad as possible, because when you look at it, you're only about 17, 18, and all the way up to 23. There's no way that you've decided what the rest of your 30, 40 years of professional life is going to look like. And as much as a broad base at that time will sort of, because everybody gets in with certain preconceived notions. I had preconceived notions in terms of where I wanted to be in terms of what I wanted to do. But doing those internships gives you a little bit of an insight as to what other than what your interests are that might be useful. But in terms of this, to your specific question, yes, internships would work. Interning with companies, particularly companies that are in this space, that would be a great insight to get the bare bones working of how things on a day-to-day basis go, as well as law firms that deal with it. It comes down to which aspect you're looking at as well. So it's good to have an equal range of, say, experience with law firms as well as with a company that actually deals in this, like a production house, or working with an agency that deals with celebrities, or even digital marketing agencies. So if you're working with them, or as a law firm that specializes, there are a lot of law firms that are now focused on this as a market. But yes, if you do work or intern with a company, that'll give you a fair bit of understanding of the entire spectrum, as it were. So to get into this, I would say, yes, some of it is just happens. But if you are very focused, and if that's what you're looking at, if you sort of try and angle all your internships and your experience in that direction, I'm sure you'll get there.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
So coming to the other half of our discussion. So recently OTT media has been consumed a lot. During the lockdown, all of us have been like a binge list, and we're just ticking it off day by day, week by week. But along with that comes a lot of controversies that does not make it to the media maybe, but you would be aware about it. Maybe you must have dealt with it. So what are few cases that really caught your attention, and as a law student or just as a lawyer just excites you about it, like we all should know, or just if you can tell us few things.
Sure. I think, well, okay, let's just take this back a step, right? So if we're looking at OTT platforms, since that's one of the things that we're discussing today, the OTT platform is just a means of communication, right? It's a mode and a method of communication. The base that's there around it is the content that's being created, and that's been going on for a fair bit of time. With regard to the OTT business as a whole, it has brought about certain changes, a lot of changes that have come into the industry itself. For the simple reason, let's just look at it as even consumer behavior, right? Earlier, when content was not available, everybody was downloading torrents, and everybody uh, was viewing things. They were viewing things illegally, whereas now with the OTT platforms, you have access to a lot of content. It's brought about a shift because you have people actually paying for content. Earlier, it was like I said, they were downloading stuff. Right now, it is being paid for on a subscription base. The other thing is the universal release. You're watching content that's being released simultaneously around the world, and you're part of Twitter conversations on it, and what works, what doesn't work, trashing a movie, liking the content. So it sort of brings everybody, including the Indian diaspora, onto the same level playing field and same conversation piece. And also, I think the biggest thing is the access to content. I mean, we've got Korean dramas, we're watching Spanish shows like Money Heist and everything. If you look at the top 10 list, it's really across the board, and it's not only Indian content, which also goes to show how consumer behavior has changed. It's not your typical Bollywood and Tamil and Hindi and Telugu movies that are working. It's content and storylines that are being brought to the forefront. So I think I think and because of that, because it's new, because it's shifting consumer behavior, it's because it's changing the way that, and this lockdown, like you said, has definitely sort of furthered the cause of it, because everybody is had a certain amount of time, at least that initial few months of lockdown or initial few weeks of lockdown, everybody was holed up and watching content, and now sort of life is going back to normalcy, or even if you're working from home. But yes, that's something that's been brought about on account of this. So with these changes, there are bound to be, regulatory concerns. There are bound to be controversies in terms of censorship and things like that, because we're just sort of catching up, and the law does have to keep making. There's only so much that you can predict, and so the law does have to make amends or changes and go on the fly. And that's something that we've been seeing, because I think the way that India has really progressed on the internet front and the mobile devices front, everybody has access to it. And access also means everybody's viewing their own content. Nobody's watching advertisements on TV the same way. The reason you stream content is you don't want to be disturbed by ads. And, so all of that, and there will be lobbies that are affected by this. So everybody is sort of catching up with the way that the changes have arisen. And so that's basically it. So in terms of specific to OTT platforms, and you were saying about the cases, yes, there have been concerns on censorship, say, for instance, and that's been well documented, and there have been a lot of cases back and forth in terms of the fact that it doesn't come in under the ambit of the censor board. That's been one of the concerns that have been raised. And there are two sides to this, as with any dispute. I mean, a lot of this is you have your own login IDs. You're choosing to watch the content. It's not something that's being beamed on television where anyone has access to. So, if you're going to find out content that's offensive or that's not for a particular rating, there have been quite a few cases which have been initiated by people, which may or may not have been necessary, because in terms of the idea is everybody should be able to make their own choices as well. But yeah, it's something that's unfolding as we are, and we know that they've sort of gotten together and working on a self-regulation, which has now been refused, and then going back to the drawing board. So it is something that's evolving, and I think both on the regulation front as well as on the censorship front, it's something that we will still keep seeing changes to. And so that's one thing. The other aspect is just in terms of the way that OTT platforms say curate and display content as well. So one of the things that they look at is, say, even when you look at a show like an Amazon Prime original or a Netflix original, a lot of the time what they do is they outsource that production capability out to a line producer, who then goes down and gets the content in and works all together and then ties it up as one nice gift wrap pouch and gives it back here. So we are seeing a lot of disputes in terms of content holders and story writers, particularly script writers and producers who take up, say, a specific idea or a concept note and develop it. Whereas when these platforms acquire those rights, they acquire all the rights. I'm talking about rights for the work itself, rights for future work, sequels, prequels, character rights, merchandising rights, all of which is taken up as an entire budget. And on some occasions, even the writer and the producer who are helping out can be excluded from future work as well. So you may have a story that you've written, you may have a concept note that you've written, but you could find out that even if it does well after it's been taken up by one of these platforms, there's a possibility that you may not be involved in the second project as well. And that's something that from this side of the fence, that's something that keeps affecting writers and content creators a fair bit. But I've acted for both sides of the fence, as you would do when you're working in a law firm. And from a sheer copyright perspective, it's best to acquire all the rights. So you've got two sides to it, and both sides are evolving, and it also comes down to negotiation powers. So when you are a smaller story writer, the chances are, in terms of what rights you're giving away, is going to be a little higher, but the opportunities that you get are also considerably higher. So there's this balance and this quid pro quo that gets played through and through. So I think that's one aspect. And also coming back to your question on earlier in terms of the myths and the glamour, one of the things is poring over these contracts, because you will have audits in place, and almost everybody who touches anything on set involved, right from the light boy down to the actors, to the scriptwriter, to the lyricist, everybody needs to be bound by these contracts. And we're talking at least 300, 400 per show. And you've got to, as a lawyer, you need to make sure you go through all of those, make sure that everything is there in place, everything is tied together, all the rights are acquired, and it's going. And so it's there's a fair bit of work involved in that, but it's also a lot of when at the end of it, when the show is out, there's always some sense of vicarious pleasure where you're looking at it saying, oh, hey, I was involved in this. So that's on the regulation, on the censorship, and just content acquisition. And this is there even on the music front. I mean, we've seen ever since the amendment of the Copyright Act in 2012, content creators, lyricists, and artists in general have always been trying to retain as much rights as they can, and they're constantly at loggerheads with whoever is acquiring the content. So that's one. And of course, now more recently, there are a lot of cases in terms of plagiarism, and you get that regardless of whether it's on an OTT platform. You get it even before theatrical releases. Very often, just before the release of the movie, you've got story writers claiming that they shared that particular work with the producer, and it does come down to the fact that as Indians, I think we don't document things enough. Even all our correspondence is fairly loose. We don't always send everything through emails. We don't always sign NDAs and things like that. So there is a fair bit of, but it is changing. I think even the industry as such. Earlier on, the contracts were pretty bare bones, and not everybody was signing up these contracts. A lot of it was just verbal arrangements, and then we've progressed now to having properly drafted contracts. So I think it's just a matter of time, and you do keep necessity does bring about invention, right? So the point is, when there is a need, the way that we've all adapted to the entire work from home scenario, the same way the industry as well is adapting to the surge of work that's coming through the OTT platforms. So yeah, that's sort of something. I don't know if that answered your question well enough, but but yeah, that is a bit about what's going on and what you need to look at on the OTT space.
So recently there has been a case, the controversy boost up the advertisement of that show, The Big Bad Billionaire, where they were talking about the, let's just say, people who committed frauds in the country, and they took it to the court saying that we don't want this to be out, and the court decided in the favor of the platform. So how does that pan out in the court? Like, why is it, how important was it for those people who were discussed in the show that this should not go out on the OTT platform, and the court decided the other way? So what was your take on it when the judgment came out?
Right. Okay. I need to say that I've only read the news write-ups on this. I haven't had a copy to haven't had the opportunity to read the judgment per se, but I do know a bit in terms of what's been going on. But broadly, this was on defamation, right? Defamation and rights to
Yeah.
privacy. That's broadly what it was. And in this case, I also understand that it was a Sahara group that had also filed, and not necessarily. Mr. Raju. So it's there are several points of concern, but this is agnostic to OTT platforms. This happens a fair bit where whenever anyone is portrayed in a negative light, approaching the court on grounds of defamation is the most standard way that you would do it, and that is the remedy that is available and afforded to every individual. I mean, right from the Full and Levy case and everything,
Mm.
where you do have a right to the way that you are portrayed, and you do have a right to your privacy and uh, to your reputation as well. So it's and Netflix, of course, in this case and in general, they have been doing a lot of docu-series. I mean, I've read so and what they call investigative journalism, and to a large extent, most of them do sort of leave you with a fairly balanced view. Like I said, I haven't read the judgment, and I'm afraid I haven't seen the TV show either as yet. But so I wouldn't comment too much on it. But having watched some of the other docu-series, I do say they do give you a fairly even view. I don't know about this one. If you've seen it, maybe you felt particularly that it brought down the reputation of one of the individuals in the show, then perhaps it may not have been as evenly placed as it was. But in general, they do a fairly neutral take on things. At least that's been my experience of watching the content. But yeah. But as of now, so it did come up before the district court, and I understand that there was an initial injunction, and they went all the way up to the Supreme Court, which directed them to go back and take a look at it and expedite the disposal of it, which they did, ultimately vacating their own injunction, which they granted. So yes, so I think there's also a balance of, I think a lot of arguments were being made for free speech as well, which is also always the case. So drawing the balance is very difficult, and even for the judiciary, I wouldn't want to be in that seat having to decide on things like this, because there are just so many factors at play. There are so many individual rights, and then you've got the rights of the investment that's gone into something like this, as well as free speech. And so there are just so many factors that are going into play that every judge makes up his mind based on the things that are presented. And so from what I understand, ultimately it did bring about the show, and I think a lot of people were watching it. I think it was also on the top 10 list, if I'm not mistaken, at some point. But things keep changing. Every week they bring out new content, and there's a new list of top 10. So yeah, so that's the other thing when it comes to defamation, because we've also been involved in a couple of cases with defamation, and you see, particularly on social media, whenever there are defamatory remarks, after a particular period of time, if it's not immediate and if there's no instant reaction, it just sort of goes down. There are just so many things happening. There are so many things trending. It just moves down you really have to scroll down on your apps to try and find any of the defamatory content of the post. So the same way, what was a big deal now, there's more content to be watched.
Okay. Thank you for that, sir. So, as we were discussing earlier, the usage of OTT platforms has really shot up in lockdown, and since a few years, it has anyway been growing. So, how do you project? How do you see the career of a media and entertainment lawyer also growing with this? What kind of work would someone who's probably just starting out would be getting, and how their career growth do you see that progressing along with the OTT platforms?
Right. I think, well, for one, it's a little it's difficult to predict to the extent of where things will be. But again, like I said, the OTT is just a platform of communication. I mean, we don't know what sort of technology is going to come up where they, if they're going to be beaming visuals directly to your brain or into your glasses the way that it is. So the channel is the OTT platform, but the ultimate thing, and everybody has been focusing on, is the content and is what you're keen on looking at, and that's something that's been there historically, right? From copyright law with the Statute of Anne protecting publishers. It's there. So you will always have the base. I think that's one of the good things about the field of law is you have the base, and then on the basis of that things keep changing. So, and they keep evolving, and the law evolves. But yes, in terms of in terms of someone planning on getting into this, yes, there definitely is a lot of scope, because we're looking at even now there are regulatory changes coming in, and there's always in terms of technology changes, there are terms of content acquisition, and there are terms of content rights management. So there are just several avenues within OTTs as well as entertainment law as well, because take a look at, say, for instance, social media influencers. A couple of years ago, there was no such thing on the horizon, and then now you have it. And then now under consumer protection law, you have liability for social media influencers. So the law will keep changing. It'll keep changing its course to sort of encompass whatever is going on as a trend and whatever changes. So the entertainment law, the entertainment field as well, will change, and it has changed, and it will continue to change. But like I said, as long as the law is one of those good professions where you will have something to work on, and as long as there are people, there will be disputes, and as long as there are disputes, there will be lawyers. So yeah, so I think that it may not be the same way that it is. Maybe by the time that the students graduate, things may have changed considerably, but it'll still be around in some manner or the other.
Right, right. So the last part you said really sums up the whole question. So moving on to the recent development that we've had with regards to the OTT platform coming under the IB ministry, what are your views on that?
Well, I think it was a natural extension of things in terms of the way that was going. I think for the longest time, this whole concept of regulation has been an issue for at least going by the number of cases that have been filed against platforms for this. So that, and then of course the next step was self-regulation and their bodies to try and work on it. But I think we still do have a legacy of some amount of control, and that is something that will be there because it's fairly broad. It's not just in the OTT platforms. We're talking about online news and everything. So there's just too much at stake for it to be unregulated. But we're yet to see how things pan out, because as of now, it's just been pretty much a shift of who's going to take care or who's going to be responsible for, until and unless we actually see the regulations or the amendments that come out into place, and whether or not they have any specific rules that are going to govern the way the platforms are going to work. We'd have to wait and watch until that point, because as of now, it's a little too preliminary to hasten any guesses as to how it's going to go about. Just that, okay, now we do know that this is the person in charge. We're going to wait and see what rules come out. And then on the basis there, depending on what comes out, I'm sure there will be some amount of opposition to it and disputes again. So if you're in law, you will have to, depending on which side as well you are. So if you're on the side of a platform and you're against the regulations, you might have a fair bit of work trying to counter that as well. But that's it. I think it's a little preliminary. It's a move that's probably anticipated and a next step as to as from where they were, but we'll really have to wait and see how things pan out.
Thank you, sir. So we have several questions here waiting for you, sir. So if we can dive into them.
Sure.
So, yes, sir. So I'll just read them out to you. So now someone is asking, does India need a special tribunal for entertainment industry?
I think we have a lot of tribunals, and I don't think we necessarily need. So you've got, when it comes down to, let's just look at it this way: if there are disputes that are governing, say, content on the IP front, you've got your commercial courts, which are doing a wonderful job. If you've got disputes in terms of the telecom regulation front with the streaming, you've already got your tribunals in place. In general, less is more. So I wouldn't say that you need another specific tribunal for entertainment specific disputes. We already do have the commercial courts, which do deal with IP and licensing of IP disputes. So that would be my opinion, that we have enough. We just need to make use of the tools that we have on hand.
So there are two similar type of questions, and I think you can answer it in one go. One is
Sure.
that after students who are graduated this year, they want to dive into the field, and how can they do that? Plus, there are people who want to shift their career to IP law. So, what trajectory will you roll out for them? Like, what can be done?
Right. I think so. If you're looking at getting into this, or if you're looking to shift into this, like any sort of thing, you would have to try and identify either if you want to work at a law firm or if you want to work in-house as a company lawyer, right?
Yeah.
And depending on that course and depending on what you see where you're looking at, I would say it is internships. I'm afraid internships that would help, or trying to get a break into that particular company. India in general, including the legal profession, is a little conservative when it comes to lateral movement. I would say that we're not as open to treating diverse backgrounds as we probably should be. So if you're doing one particular stream of law, jumping into a newer stream of law would need you, like in any other professional change in India, would need you to sort of take a couple of steps back if you're willing to, start off a little bit lower and start off at a lower level than what you possibly were. But, if it's something that you're truly interested in, there are always opportunities. And I think what I would say is, if you're looking at learning a lot more, starting off with, say, a smaller company, a startup that's in the field, or starting off with a smaller or a boutique firm that's in the field, that would really make a difference, because some of these, so one of my clients as well, who's been around for at least 6-7 years that I've been working with, they really climbed the ranks, so to speak, and they exploded. And when I started off doing their work, it was only basic trademark and a few agreements that began, but now they're making content for multiple OTT platforms, and so the work has just exploded. So you grow either with an organization or a firm, or you try and you go into an established firm in that particular field of law, and in this case in entertainment. So there are a few niche players already. Would be good to move or try and see if you can get an opportunity with them.
Right. So there are, I think you did just answer a bit of it, but do you have any idea of any LLM courses that you would suggest to people who want to probably venture out into this area?
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. I think that there are quite a few courses that are available. I don't know any specific to entertainment law, but on the IP front, there are quite a few LLMs, and there are quite a few LLMs, particularly outside the country, that are offered that give you the opportunity to mix and match a couple of these courses. And so, that's what you might want to be looking at. But I think when it comes down to, doing LLMs as well, it really, or studying in a particular field, it really comes down to what you're looking at that for. It might help if you're doing particularly if you're doing a career shift. Say you've been doing only commercial litigation, or you've only been doing one particular field, and then you want to sort of switch tracks. A specific course might help in that. but again, it comes down to why you're doing that and what's the actual purpose of doing the course. So depending on that, there are multiple factors. Where the course is being offered, is it online, offline, and who knows how things are going to be right now with the whole pandemic and things like that. But yes, I can't name any off the top of my head, I'm afraid. But yeah, do your research and see whether or not there's anything specific. But again, like I said, you need to sort of balance it out. If you're looking at it only from a career shift, you also have to do some sort of ROI analysis to see whether or not, because you may need to start all the way at the bottom rung in whichever new place that you're going, even after that, and whether or not that's something, just doing an LLM may not solve all of that, but it's definitely a step. And of course, right now, there are just so many courses online, including what you guys offer. So, it's no longer a very traditional, do your degree and do your master's degree. It's as and when you want to learn things. And that's a really good shift to the way that it should be. And I think, you also sort of try, whichever stage, even now, if you're in college and things like that, when you come out and you work for a particular number of years, I think maybe around 6 or 7 years down the line, you do sort of get that urge to study. And so, it might help deferring that LLM and those sort of studies to that stage rather than doing something immediately out of the box, because professionally, where you're like, what, I want to learn something in this or deep dive into that. So having that at that stage would definitely make a difference as well.
Right. So another person is asking what exactly a student in law school can do differently if they want to specifically focus having a career in this area. Is there something they have to do additionally? If you recommend something.
I don't think there's anything additional that you can do, but internships would help, reading up. And there's another thing that you can do is also, which now almost everybody seems to, which is sort of an even playing field, is actually reading and writing. Start a blog, write about the content. If you like this particular field, publish your work, write your own blogs. All of that helps, because the more you read and the more you put content out there, the more you are associated with a particular thing. You never know when, if you're applying to a job at a firm and an associate may have read an article that you published or a blog that you put up. So I would say intern with the business or the firm that you're keen on in terms of the subject matter that you're looking at, but also read and write. The reading is really something that's absolutely essential. And I'm sure all of you know that, given that you've taken up law. But reading and writing is equivalently important. So start a blog, write stuff, write for people, write for other blogs. You don't need to start your own blog, but send your content out to other people, write on the field, understand it, and you will sort of learn along as you go along the way. But that's what I would say. I'd say intern, read and write.
Okay, thank you, sir. So, when you're talking about interning, it so happens I've heard from many students that when they want to specifically intern in the media or entertainment sector, they always look for some prior experience. So, is that something, how do students deal with that? Should they do courses on that? Should they write more? Which of it can balance that practical experience for them to go ahead and get that internship?
It's always a tricky question, this, because there's a simple reason that it's the whole chicken and egg story. And I'm sure that you've heard this analysis as well, because it just is. You can't really expect, interns or even first year associates to come in with any amount of knowledge. Not any amount of knowledge, beg your pardon, that came out wrong. Any amount of experience. What you are looking at for is ideally, someone who's willing to learn. So I think you just need to keep applying to these places. You will find a fit. There are firms, and in fact, even when we take interns on, we let them do pretty much what we're doing, and that's absolutely important, right? So it may take some time in terms of finding a right fit, but you've got to keep trying, and I'm sure you'll find the right fit. Because if you get into a system or a company or a firm that gives you hands-on experience and is also willing to look at you for the fact that we've all been students. We didn't have a shred of evidence getting into this, shred of experience getting into this at the start of it. So if you're treated that way as well, I think that'll be a better fit. So just keep trying, knock on all doors. Some doors will definitely be better than others. So that's probably what I would say. But yes, keep writing, because like I said, that might help your reputation to that extent, as to at least being knowledgeable in the field.
That's wonderful answer, sir. Because definitely that's a question. You can a next story. Where do I like? I want experience, but I want internship. So I want internship for experience and experience for internship. That doesn't end, right? It's a vicious cycle. And so we have few attendees and questions on YouTube as well, and they are asking what type of work should they aim for in internship, what they should definitely learn in their internship if they are pursuing any.
Okay. What I would say when you're an intern is take a lot of initiative, because you may need to, and whenever you're working, whether it's with a company or with a firm, a lot of the time all the lawyers are just involved in their own work, doing their own deadlines, doing their own thing, right? And if you keep going, and if you keep asking for work to be done, that really helps. I know, not because sometimes, because like I said, sometimes we can all just get very obsessed in our own work, and it's important to know that someone's taking that initiative. The other thing that I would also probably do is probably do a little bit of research in terms of, once you say get an internship with a particular person or a firm, try and do a little bit of research, see a bit about them, try and find out about them. There are so many avenues available right now. It's good to know what they are like, what they're working on, because it'll help you in terms of understanding the sort of work as well. And always actually just ask, because half the time you do get things only if you ask. And if you ask for things like what's actually being done, ask for ways that you can help out, I think most people would be willing to. Don't get relegated to research work alone. Try and see if you can ask to sort of do things that whoever is working with you is working on. But that said, research is an important part of practicing law. So don't just look down on that as well. But I would say ask. That is the biggest thing. A lot of the times I've had interns just come in and sit there in the hopes of getting assigned work, but it doesn't work that way, because everybody is just going about their own thing. I would also say try and pick smaller firms where you might be needed to do things, and your or a firm that has a reputation of assigning actual work to interns. And I'm sure the student community is fairly communicative, so I think you do all there are so many, I see reviews on Lawctopus and a lot of other places, and people writing their own reviews of firms, that it does give you an idea. You sort of know going into it who's going to be a bit more open to actually assigning work. So do your research and ask. I think those would be the two things that I would say.
Right. So we have a couple of more questions over here. So someone's asking, what is the scope of art law in India? And they are saying that it's quite limited and almost next to nothing. So what, according to you, one, is this scope of art law? And second, there are hardly any independent counsels working in the media and entertainment industry. So do you see that changing in the near future?
Okay, all right. So there are two questions. Question one is on art law, right? Okay. Art law, I think, is something that, again, the law sort of follows depending on consumer behavior, what people are doing. Historically, if you look at art form in India, we don't really place the same amount of emphasis on the artist. And I think that's, it's a simple thing, because when you say, look at Renaissance art, you do know, everybody can tell you, oh, XYZ, or whether it's Bernini or whether it's Caravaggio or whatever. You do have certain names, whereas in India, for the longest time, we've had very few artists who've sort of hit phenomenal fame, but that's very few, because we in general don't buy artwork based on an artist. And I think as long as that's there, and only when that changes will there be more and more work on the art law front. But that said, yes, it's definitely changed over the years. I've acted for a few art galleries in terms of the content and the artworks that they acquire. People are getting a little more aware of their rights. Artists are getting a little bit more aware of their rights. Sure, for the simple reason that one, everybody has access these days. You're also dealing, and it's not jurisdiction specific, right? You could be selling your artwork anywhere. So yes, it will definitely. There is. It's pretty niche, and again, depending on consumer behavior, it might be something that you can look up and might pick up from. I do know a couple of lawyers who are in that particular field. They have traditional history of being affiliated with either being art collectors themselves and their families, or working on that front. So it's there, maybe a little minuscule, but it may expand. That's what it would be. I'm sorry, I forgot the second part of your question, which was
So there are hardly any independent counsels practicing
right.
in entertainment.
I that wouldn't necessarily be true, because I do think that there are a fair number of independent counsels who do work. Again, it comes down to the size of the client. You do have some of it depends on whether you're working on behalf of an artist or you're working on behalf of the production house. But broadly speaking, the bigger players and the bigger production houses will look at bigger firms rather than individual lawyers, for the simple reason that you're looking at across the board work, whether it's regulatory, whether it's intellectual property, and you're also looking at work across the country, right? So having that amount, being able to get work done across the country, and so that's why having bigger firms and offices that have scope and range of influence over there. And like I said, a lot of this is last minute. So all of a sudden, if you've got to say somebody sued you in a district court in Bihar, then you need to have the bandwidth to have something being done over there as well, which is one of the reasons why you would have bigger firms handle. But that's it. On the other end of the spectrum, if you are a smaller artist or an artist that's upcoming, then chances are you may be engaging a smaller independent lawyer to begin with to review your contract. So there's definitely scope. In terms of, we do have a population of 1 billion, we do have disputes, we do have needs, and so yeah, there is enough of a market for everyone.
Right, sir. So we'll take a few more questions now. This question has come a few times now. So the scope of media and entertainment, is it more in the metro cities, or how would you define that for people who are looking to work in those specific regions?
So you're saying, is it more in the metros?
Metro cities, or is it still growing in other tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 cities?
Okay, so historically you would have it in the metros predominantly, because in terms of the sheer nature of the work, more often than not, the registered offices of all the major production houses are in the metros. So, whenever there's any dispute that arises, those will be litigated or dealt with over there. You do have more regional content that's coming up, and there is more access to that. But again, even the business itself, forget entertainment law, the entertainment business itself, most of the production work happens in metros. So even if the content is from, say, a city that isn't metro, your chances are for it to actually take place and to get effect would be in the metros. I would say you would need to look in the metros if that's where you're looking at, because the business is based out of there, the disputes are based out of there, the lawyers are based out of there.
So just following up on that, because the work from home culture is seeping in, does that make a difference?
Right. I mean, but you're working remotely. You may be in your hometown, but still most of the work that will ultimately take place is from a metro, in the sense of with regard to entertainment law. But yes, that said, the way that this pandemic has panned out and the way that everybody's changed, it could really change completely. I mean, I think it comes down to the way people respond to this, because the legal profession in general is very slow to change. But at the same time, we have seen, and no, historically, that's how it is. We've got lawyers who are steeped in tradition, and we value experience, and this is the way that it's done, sort of setup. So, for it to change completely may take some time. But I mean, you do see some people. It comes down to an individual, because you do see some people who really adapted to the whole work from home, and some who are still asking the court. The other day when I was there, there's someone who was still asking for physical hearing, saying, can we please come, because this is not working out. So it comes down to, I don't know what overall as an industry would be like, but I think yes, for at least a couple of months, maybe until mid next year, unless of course there are vaccines that are mass produced, which is also there in the news as of now. I think the way that we work will change dramatically. So yeah, I think we'll have to see how that pans out. And if it does, it'll be great if you can work from anywhere. But I do think, agnostic from whether it's a metro or not, I think it has definitely given a wonderful shift in terms of the way that we work. And I think knowing that you can get things done remotely is wonderful.
Right, sir. Thank you so much. So we have Shweta Mishra asking what courses should they take for a career in entertainment law. So I'm just posting here the courses that are available with Law Seco as well. So if you have anything to add on that, if apart from, as you suggested earlier, they should be writing and reading more, is there anything else you'd want to suggest taking courses, or something that you've done in your career that you would suggest to them as well?
Okay, so I didn't do very many courses on entertainment law, but I did on IP. So the World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, has a lot of certificate courses that they're engaged in. So some of them are free, some of them are paid for, but they're really good. And so on the entertainment front, to the best of my knowledge, there are a few LLMs that do it, and there are a few, I think, on media laws, which is a little broader. But yeah, I would think if you've got courses already, but yes, WIPO is a good bet for IP at least.
All right. So right. Priyanka, are there more questions on YouTube?
I guess no, because only a couple I answered them.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
talking about internships, me and Man were just discussing a while back that sort of emphasized so much on internships, and in lockdown, students were paranoid that they won't get internships, but through Law Seco, through our team, as we said, in placement team, they have managed to get more than 250 students internship during lockdown as well. So
wonderful.
Yeah, so I guess there are internships, so keep applying. I mean, definitely doors will open, or you can join us and we can help you with that.
As sir was also specifying that, once you get on that path, once you concentrate your internships in that area, then it will be easier to get more internships and get more specialized internships in the companies that are more focusing on entertainment and media laws. So
but I would also say that I think you do need to balance out between being specific and also just trying everything out, because like I said, you at 17, 18, you have certain ideas, but you really don't know what the rest of your life is going to look like. So be as open as possible. If you've got, say, maybe 2 semester breaks that you've got in a year, maybe do one trying to focus on the one that you're looking at, and one that's completely different, because you may or may not like what it is. But if you don't like it, it may reaffirm reiterate your interest, or it may sort of open doors as well. So maybe try one specific and one general on each occasion.
Right. I think that's great advice. So we'll just take one last question. So they're asking if you have any comment on the recent specific consultation by government regarding amendment to copyright law. Will it favor the labels and productions?
Okay. So in terms of the way that copyright law has been evolving as well, I think we've had, say, a shift from the way that it was, and maybe not just the law, the way that the industry as well worked. Like originally, a lot of these arrangements were all verbal, they were all outright acquisitions, the whole understanding of, licensing separate aspects of the copyright that was not something that India in general was doing. There were a few people who are well versed in that, and they've been able to monetize different streams of their rights under copyright law fairly well. With the 2012 amendment, there have been certain things like, say, the royalty at a 50% rate or an equivalent rate and things like that, which brought about over there, which on the ground and practically, I'd say there's been some amount of a gap between what was entitled as to what's actually been going on. So I think in terms of the way that the amendments are going to go forward, as well as a reaction to all of this, in terms of trying to make it a bit more even playing field, as it were. But in terms as to whether or not it would favor the labels or the artist or the production house, we'd have to see until the actual bill is on the table, and more than the bill, in fact, until it's actually passed. But yes, it would be interesting to see how we further amend it, because the whole issue of music and royalties and paying the lyricists and the composers royalties at an equivalent rate is something that was brought about by the 2012 amendment. But in terms of the contracts that are actually being drafted, it's far from that. Or even if it is there, it's in a manner that's very different from the way that it was intended. So we'll have to wait and watch, I'm afraid.
Right. So thank you so much. Priyanka, if there are no more questions, I think we will cross the time limit by then. So let's end the session here. If anyone has any doubts regarding the session, if you have more questions, I'm dropping my phone number here. If you want to know about career prospects in intellectual property, you may reach out to me. And if there are specific questions, I think we can pass it on to sir in an email, and as and when he gets time, he may revert to those. And I think that
we can arrange a new webinar again as and when sir has time, because I guess a lot of students want to learn a lot from you. So whenever you have time, we can arrange a new webinar again.
Very kind of you, but I don't know. I think I'm sure colleges must be reopening and webinars have also been done to death. So yeah, but yeah, no, I'd be happy to take any questions at any time. You can drop me.
We'll be happy to hear more from your experience, and we have other basic sessions on media laws as well on our YouTube channel, so you can always go check them out as well. And that's all then. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, sir. This has really been enlightening. The questions were just, there are still too many questions that have been unanswered, but we hope we can get you back for another session for those questions. And thank you so much again, participants. And thank you, Priyanka, for hosting this with me.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir, for joining us. It's Diwali time and everyone is busy wrapping up their work, but still you took out time for us. That means a lot. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Happy Diwali.
Right. Happy Diwali.